So maybe we would like to begin with the land acknowledgement. The city of Hamilton is situated upon the traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and the Mississauga. This land is covered by the Dishwit-One-Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, which was an agreement between the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, to share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. Today, the city of Hamilton is home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we recognize that we must do more to learn more about the rich history of this land so that we can be better keepers, residents, neighbors, partners, and caretakers. Thank you for the opportunity to present as part of Spiritual Care Awareness Week at Hamilton Health Sciences. The Spiritual Care Awareness Week is a week when organizations and institutions throughout the world recognize the spiritual dimensions of health, as well as the work of spiritual care practitioners and spiritual care providers or psychospiritual practitioners in our communities. The Canadian Association for Spiritual Care is a professional association that supports the development of the profession and is responsible for credentialing of spiritual care practitioners. They have chosen a theme for this year's Spiritual Care Awareness Week, and the theme is called Spiritual Health is Health. So this theme emphasizes the role of spiritual health as a part of holistic health, and it is our privilege to present on the topic of spirituality in healthcare as part of ethics and resilience rounds today. A growing volume of research has documented the impact of spirituality on health and health outcomes. So most of the research really focuses on that, and much of the literature is from the field of end-of-life and palliative care, where spiritual care is well established as a domain of whole person care. So for our time today, rather than focusing on health outcomes, given that the focus of these rounds is ethics and resilience, we want to take the next 45 minutes or so to draw your attention to how spirituality is defined in healthcare, first of all, and then we will look at how spirituality of healthcare providers and the spirituality of patients are present in clinical settings. We want to highlight that spirituality is a part of the human experience, and as such, it is also a part of a patient-clinician encounter in healthcare. Our hope is that you will see that spirituality is an ingredient that informs ethical practice and contributes to resilience of both patients and healthcare providers. So the objectives for today's presentation are the following. First of all, we'll try to define spirituality as it is understood in healthcare. And then we'll look at how spirituality of the healthcare provider impacts clinical practice. And finally, we'll look at the role of spirituality for our patients. So I'd like to begin just with opening up the conversation in the chat by inviting you to reflect on how do you understand spirituality? How might spirituality be same or different from religion? Do you believe that you are maybe spiritual but not religious? Or would you say that you are not spiritual or not religious? So I'm looking forward to hearing some conversation in the chat about this. How do you understand spirituality? Is there a difference between spirituality and religion from your perspective? Do you identify as spiritual or religious or neither? So I'm reading spirituality is your vital breath, the belief that something is bigger than oneself. It touches on meaning, purpose, and connection. It's a way of connecting with nature and people. Spirituality and religion need not be the same thing. Spirituality for me is a connectedness to what is larger than me, not necessarily a God. The universe, the world around me, non-human animals and nature. It's a transcendent dimension. Okay. Thank you for these reflections. So I just want to share a definition of spirituality here that has come up by consensus. Spirituality is a broad and complex concept, as we have heard this through the chat. There are many different ways of understanding. So what I'm going to share is a definition that has come up as a result of a consensus of a variety of healthcare providers that came together at one of the palliative care conferences in 2009. And spirituality here is defined as an aspect of humanity that refers to the way individuals seek and express meaning and purpose, and the way they experience their connectedness to the moment, to self, to others, to nature, and to the significant or sacred. One of the a word that often trumps people when we talk about spirituality is that there's this association with ghosts or something supernatural. We are very close to Halloween, but when we talk about spirituality in healthcare, we're really not talking about spirits or ghosts as a supernatural phenomena. This is a definition that, like I said, was developed in 2009. It's a consensus definition developed at a healthcare conference in palliative care, and it has been a definition that's most broadly used in clinical practice and research. The Oxford Dictionary also defines the word spirit as a non-physical part of a person, which is the seat of emotions and character. And spirit also includes qualities regarded as formative or definitive of the character of a person. So colloquially, we often say that somebody is in good spirits, which is interpreted as being in a positive mood, or that someone has a strong spirit, as in having a strong energy or ability to overcome obstacles. The words spirit and soul are often used interchangeably. And we may also say that music, art, and nature are medicines for the soul. So it's an abstract concept, and again, I'm just going to draw attention to the consensus statement that spirituality is an aspect of humanity that refers to the way individuals seek and express meaning and purpose, and the way they experience their connectedness to the moment, to self, to nature, to others, and to the significant or sacred. In the chat, I've noticed that some people have addressed the distinction between religion and spirituality. So as I was thinking about this, I thought of some conceptual differences between spirituality and religion that I wanted to share with you. So I understand religion to be primarily external. It constitutes a worldview or perspective or beliefs. It is often prescribed. It is communal. It is shared by a group of people. There might be some creeds or statements of beliefs that people in that community will share as a part of their religion. It might be more traditional or more static. There might be an ultimate truth, and some people identify with a particular religion. Spirituality, on the other hand, tends to be more experiential, more internal. It's an application of a worldview. So for example, if somebody says, I am of a particular religion, or I come from a particular religious background, that what does it mean to be a part of that religious background will be information that comes out of the spirituality, the application of a worldview, the application of that religious perspective. Spirituality is often subscribed as opposed to prescribed, so it's grounded in a personal experience. There's a tendency to have more principles as opposed to creeds. It can also be evolving and changing. It can be multiple truths that inform a spirituality, and it's an aspect of humanity. So there's overlaps between spirituality and religion. People from a same religious background or a similar religious background could have very different spiritualities, and people with very different spiritualities can have a same religious background, and people with a different religious background can have a same spirituality too. So knowing what someone's religious background may give us a clue how the person makes meaning, or what is important to them, or what beliefs inform their decision making, or how they relate to self, others, and the world. But we also really don't know anything about their spiritual identity unless we really ask the questions as to what does it mean for you to be a part of this faith tradition? How do you make sense out of the world? What is most important to you? What do you consider sacred? So what we are really concerned about in healthcare is understanding how people are interpreting their religious background or their religious identity. And we know that spirituality shapes who am I, how do I relate to myself, to others, to nature, how do I relate to what is beyond myself, if I believe in a God or gods or sacred, or some people might call it the ultimate reality. Spirituality shapes what is meaningful to me, what is the purpose of life, what is sacred or of utmost importance to me, what do I want to become, how do I want to live my life and make decisions, what gives me hope today, and what do I hope for in the future. And spirituality can be broken down into 3 different themes. A theme that has to do with the self, and it talks about the who am I and what is my purpose and what gives my life meaning. So this is about the self. There is also the dimension that is related to other people or other beings or nature. So what is my role in relationships with others? How do my decisions impact the world? How do I relate to another person or to nature? And the transpersonal aspect or the dimension of spirituality is what do I believe about the universe, or the transcendent, if there is a transcendent. Even saying that I do not believe that there is a transcendent puts me in a relationship with what I don't believe exists. So the origin of the human life is another piece that is a part of this transpersonal dynamic, understanding where did we come from, or where do we go when we die? Is there a God or a spirit? Where did life come from on the planet? Where did my life come from? Was there a life before me, or what happens after death? One of the difficulties with attending to spiritual needs and understanding spiritual needs in healthcare comes from the lack of understanding what constitutes spiritual needs in a secular or post-secular society. So just this past spring, so in 2003, a study was completed in Denmark, and it's a population sample of about 104,000 adults that participated in this study to identify spiritual needs. The Danish society is somewhat similar to the Canadian society in a way that it is considered post-secular. And in the past 20 years or so, there's been a renewed interest in spirituality and religion as a reaction to the modernist worldview of being very secular. So in this Danish post-secular society, the Danes identified 4 spiritual needs. They scored very high. In fact, the highest scores were coming in spiritual needs that have nothing to do really with religious needs. And the first one, the highest one, is the inner peace needs. And this was identified as a need to dwell at a place of quietness and peace, to be able to plunge into nature or beauty, find a sense of inner peace, or talk with someone about what is fearful or worrisome. The second was generative needs, and this is about passing on life experience to others, to be assured that your life was meaningful or that it has value, to give solace to someone, to give away something from yourself. The third one was existential needs, to be forgiven, to forgive someone, to dissolve an open aspect of your life, to talk about the questions of meaning in life, to talk about the possibility of life after death, find meaning in illness and or suffering. And lastly, religious needs. So this has to do with participation in prayer alone or with someone, someone to pray for you, or to be able to turn to a higher presence, to read spiritual literature, or to participate in a religious ceremony. This study shows that spiritual needs are still quite important in a post-secular society, and represent a spiritual dimension that is still an integral part of healthcare. And I have a couple of examples that I came across just as I was thinking about some of the situations where I work with patients where this was very evident for me as I provided for the spiritual needs of the patients that were not coming from a religious background. So a patient who wanted to speak with me about her decision to have medical assistance in dying. When we met, she spoke about her suffering, her quality of life, her prognosis, and how her decision made sense to her. However, she was also struggling with her relationship with her daughter. Her daughter was expecting her first child and was really hoping that her mother would be able to meet the baby. The patient wanted to process how her decision to end her life through medical assistance in dying will impact her relationship with her daughter, with her unborn grandchild, and her partner, who she was also leaving behind. She spoke openly about how tired she was and that there was no treatment to cure her illness. It was very important for her to have some dignity in her dying and to be able to control when she would die. But she also struggled with being able to receive forgiveness from her daughter and to forgive herself, as she was wondering about whether or not she will damage this relationship if she dies before the grandchild is born. Another one is a patient that I work with who sustained a severe burn to his hands, and this patient was a musician, a pianist. He had multiple skin grafts, and his injury permanently damaged the mobility of his hands, especially the dexterity of his fingers. So we had many conversations about how he was feeling, being able to play the piano both as a form of personal expression and as a means to make a living. He dedicated most of his life to becoming a musician, and it has become his purpose. So the recovery from the burn and the subsequent rehab was a very, very long process. And the hope for him to regain his full mobility necessary to hit the piano keys with the skill that he had prior to the accident was almost impossible. He was struggling to find a new purpose. This affected his mood and his willingness to participate in rehab. A few days prior to his discharge from hospital, I remembered our last conversation, and he said, "I'm still not sure what I will do and what my life's purpose will be now, but I am not dead. I am alive, and I am going to find a reason to continue to live." So I don't think that we resolved a new purpose by the time of his discharge, but I thought it was hopeful that he was at least being able to see some sense of meaning moving forward and some hope to potentially figure out what his new purpose in life might be, even if he's not able to become a pianist or a musician that he was before the accident. In this slide, I just wanted to talk about the different worldviews and spiritualities that we also encounter in healthcare that inform our patients, as well as some healthcare providers. So a worldview is often a system of beliefs or perspectives about the world. A worldview, whether it's a religious, a secular, a scientific, or a humanistic, will shape our spirituality. The answer to the question of who I am, or what is the meaning of life, or what may be the ultimate purpose of life is different for every person, even when they share the same worldview. And similarly, how we understand what is health or what causes illness or suffering and death comes from this worldview and the spirituality that shapes that. So, for example, this first image that we see here on the right is an indigenous medicine wheel. There are many different interpretations of the indigenous worldview and spirituality represented by the medicine wheel. However, most agree that the circles of the wheel symbolize a balance and interconnectedness of a continuous interaction of the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual realities. So the wheel is called the medicine wheel, which in itself suggests a holistic perspective of health, where health is dependent on maintaining a balance of all of these elements. This particular worldview will impact spiritual practices of indigenous people, their meaning making, and their relationships. The second image that we see here is an ancient symbol of the Taoist tradition. This is also a circle where forces of two opposing energies of yin and yang are represented. Life then consists of these two interdependent energies, and each of these energies, according to the traditional healing practices, is associated with different elements in nature, including some human organs. So, for example, yin is the cold energy, and it represents rest, the feminine. It is connected with solid organs such as kidney, lungs, liver, and the heart, where the yang energy corresponds to the masculine, to the hollow organs such as gallbladder, stomach, and intestine. Health then is understood as the state of balance between these two energies, between the yin and the yang, the cold and the hot. Maintaining a state of balance is sometimes a strife in life, and Taoist spiritual practices relate to creating a sense of balance by maintaining the appropriate amount of heat and cold in the body. Then this is a very common one that is present. So what goes around comes around. It's an image that represents a belief system where people believe that every action has consequences. What goes around comes around, and all the consequences may transcend this physical life. Illness, death, misfortune can be attributed to positive or negative actions that have occurred maybe even in the past lives. The figure here, the image actually on the right here, is from Michelangelo's painting, The Creation of Adam. Adam is the first human according to the biblical story, which is a prominent theistic worldview in the Abrahamic traditions. And it is present in many cultures where there is a belief in a higher power or a God that impacts human beings' relationships and the universe. Therefore, illness is often seen as consequential to the will of God. And lastly, the image here represents a biomedical worldview where small particles, atoms, cells, and living organisms interact with each other in a complex system of natural processes and relationships shaped by natural laws. This, we can say, is a dominant view or a scientific worldview in the mainstream or Western healthcare we practice today. And when we encounter patients or families that don't share this worldview, we might be finding ourselves in a situation of challenge or conflict. So I'm going to invite Juliet to share an example when a healthcare team was working with a family who had a different worldview.
Yeah, thank you, Clara. So the following is an example regarding accommodation for a specific spiritual ritual request during a very sacred moment for someone in their family. So I was called to support a family whose loved one was nearing end of life. We spoke about the dying person, and I understood that the experience of death had a sacred significance. As many families experiencing a death of a loved one, they were also visibly sad and grieving the loss, or the soon to be loss. However, there was something else that was also contributing to their stress. I asked about their spiritual background and what would be most important to them. According to the family's faith tradition and their spiritual practice around dying, The family believed that the dying patient had to be moved either outside or be placed on the floor. They believed that the closer to the ground the physical body is, the smoother the transition to the afterlife would be. I wasn't sure if the family had spoken with the healthcare team about moving the body to the floor or anywhere, or if they just assumed that this wouldn't be possible. The logistics of providing care anywhere else, either outside or on the floor, were just confusing to the team. So I took the time to explore the family's belief system, and I was able to talk to the team and explain the rationale behind the request of moving the body. It was evident that this was very important to the family, as they mentioned that this was important to the patient that we were caring for. So once I shared this with the team had an aha moment saying, wow, we didn't know the significance behind the request. So then they proceeded to accommodate as best they could in the situation we were in. They were able to place a sheet clean on the floor with a little mattress, and safely and cautiously they were able to move the patient to the floor in the patient's room. And then the staff proceeded to give some privacy to the family, who then needed to sing some prayers and some mantras and be together as a family as this person transitioned to the afterlife as they believed. So we can see here that the medical team cared as best they could for this patient, with the help and the support of the family and their feedback and what they were requesting, and vice versa. Going back to Clara's point about caring for the self, others, the transpersonal in a spiritual dimension, we see that the patient in this case, they wanted the end of life that it was spiritually meaningful to them. We saw how the family came together to advocate for their loved one, for the patient, as a form to honor and respect this person. And then when it comes to the transpersonal, we saw that it was meaningful for them to see or to witness this end of life in a way that was smooth, a smooth transition of the spirit to an afterlife, as they believed happened. So this example is just to highlight a very specific spiritual need and accommodation that happened. This was not well known to the team. The team wasn't sure what to do, but through conversation, we managed to support the patient and the family. So this is just an invitation to take time, just a few minutes, make a big difference, to listen to the families, listen to your patients, be open to hearing diverse spiritual requests. You'll be surprised of what you can hear and what you can learn. And then if able, we can support our patients as they go through this. This is important to providing excellent patient care. And then down the road, this will affect the grieving process for the families as well. Thank you, Clara.
All right. Thanks, Juliet. So that's what, I mean, the examples that we shared so far have to do with the spirituality of the patients as it comes to us in the healthcare setting. We also know that the healthcare providers bring in their own spirituality. Cultures around the world have traditional healing practices that arise out of a worldview and spirituality of the community, and healthcare providers are also shaped by their cultural backgrounds, experiences, and spirituality that shapes how they practice. So looking into our Canadian experience, and the very first hospital that was established in North America was established by Augustinian nuns who worked as nursing sisters. They arrived in Canada in 1539, and just about 5 years after their arrival, the Augustinian nuns founded the first permanent hospital in New France, Hotel Dieu is the hospital, and it's still located in Quebec City. Their operating spirituality um, was what moved them to care for the sick, and many of them were not even nurses by profession or physicians or anything like that. They had very limited knowledge, but were very much interested in supporting and caring for individuals who were living in New France at the time. Their operating spirituality that moved them to do this work was basically from a perspective of seeing God in each of their patients. They served them with compassion using the medicines and treatments available at the time. The spirituality that grounded this work was articulated in the historic documents of the hospital, and it states compassion for suffering, respect for the individual, and a commitment to service. There was also a shadow side of the spirituality that included an exclusive perspective, a very Eurocentric colonial spirituality, and brought practices that had negative impact on the relationship with Indigenous communities in Canada. Well before the arrival of the Europeans and the foundation of Hotel Dieu Hospital, Indigenous communities used healing practices such as ceremonies and plant, animal, or mineral-based medicine, energetic therapies, and physical or hands-on techniques. This was very much a part of living in community and being cared for by the members of community. The sick people were not separated from the community, and they were taken care of by the elders or members of the community. Dr. Evan Adams is a Canadian Indigenous physician who continues to practice medicine and is also informed by his Indigenous heritage. The following is a reflection about healthcare that he has shared with at one of the meetings with Indigenous leaders. And he says, First Nations people have always had an incredible understanding of themselves, their health, and their place in the world. Living wisely with good health is something we have always done, and we are often reaching back into our ancestral knowledge, our traditional ways of being and knowing, to reaffirm how we can live healthier lives today and tomorrow. The generation before us hardly interacted with the healthcare system, often only just near the end of life. If the entire healthcare system disappeared today, we would still be taking care of each other, and we are taking care of each other today. This is Dr. Evan Adams, Deputy Provincial Health Officer for British Columbia. So what I'm trying to say is that healthcare providers, just like our patients, bring in their cultural knowledge, their practices, their spirituality into the workplace. So my invitation to you is to reflect on how might the spirituality of healthcare providers impact their role. So think about, perhaps from your own experience, how has your spirituality impacted you in your practice, in your way of being with your patients, in your interactions? Was there ever a situation where you felt that something was not how you believed it should be, when your worldview may have been challenged? I'm looking forward to hearing some answers in the chat about this. So how might the spirituality of healthcare providers impact their role? Or how has this been for you? Yeah, finding meaning in what feels arbitrary or tragic. Yeah. Yes, we can. So yeah, please, if you wanted to raise your hand or speak up, that's another way to participate. If you would like to do that. If that's easier.
Claire, there's another chat there that says our own worldview may impact our ability to understand the worldview of others and how that relates to their treatment. And that could have a really positive impact, or it could actually be more of a challenge as well, especially if there's a
Exactly.
bit of a
Exactly.
collision.
Exactly. Grounding was self when we face uncertainties. Yeah. Some individuals find it easier to provide care to individuals who share their beliefs and worldviews. That's true. Sometimes it can be more challenging too. For those of you who watched the TV series House, I was always curious what was his spirituality. The physician there.
So Clara, while people keep putting in their thoughts, I wonder if I can share my
sure.
experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Do you mind going to the next slide, please?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. So we welcome any more comments that you may have, and we'll read them. For now, as we wait, I will share an experience that I had providing care and how my own worldview kind of shifted or something changed. So in a similar way that we bring who we are to the room, our patients also bring who they are in their visits or in their stay with us. Sometimes our patients are open about it, but other times this may not be so evident. Based on what I have heard from patients, they are needing us, practitioners, to take a minute to hear them out and, when possible, be a bridge between what is being asked of them and what they're willing to do or not, and sometimes they even explain why or how. As mentioned before, most of the time we're focused on the medical and physical part of things. So some of you may resonate with these questions when we ask patients, is their pain well managed? Or, for the nurses out there, when was their last bowel movement? Or perhaps, when is their next test? So we take care of these things most of the time on the floor. But here's an example of how I encountered a new belief system, one that I hadn't witnessed before. When called to support parents regarding a termination of pregnancy or miscarriage, this is an example, the parents are typically devastated and visually expressing diverse emotions surrounding grief and loss. Normally, we're called to provide psychospiritual support, which involves oftentimes prayers and blessings. One day I was called, and I was informed by the team that this was a planned and well-desired pregnancy. But it had to be terminated due to significant medical complications in the gestation period. The family was requesting a prayer and a blessing for their little one, whose life had just ended, or so I thought. I arrived to the unit, I checked in with the team. They took me in to see the family, they introduced us to one another. Before prayers, I tried to learn a little bit more about the family's cultural and faith background. The family expressed that they love and they will continue to deeply love their little one. That life in this form may not have been for long, but they deeply trusted that this baby's energy would remain in some degree in the universe. And this was enough for them to hold on to hope. To them, Their baby's physical life as we know it had ended, but their energy will carry on with them for eternity. They also trusted that if the little one's soul wished to return to them in their next pregnancy, that they would welcome that. At this point, I felt something within me, within my worldview and my own spirituality shifting. This family was grieving, just like most, in a very difficult situation like this. But their belief system brought them a sense of meaning, peace, and comfort. It did not feel like a devastating grief, but a graceful and hopeful one. What they shared with me helped me understand their spirituality and belief system to best support them in my prayers and blessing. As I mentioned, I hadn't witnessed this idea before of the soul having autonomy. This was new for me. I was impacted by the idea of the soul of an unborn child being able to redirect their future. This experience made me realize that I associated the soul's will and intelligence with physical years lived on Earth. I was not aware of that. Whether right or wrong, I discovered that I unconsciously valued the soul's capacity to make decisions based on their human years. I still reflect on this experience from time to time, and I acknowledge any shifts, any feelings of the sense of self, others, and the divine. So this example is mainly to highlight that our lived experiences can change or shift our own spirituality and worldview. Through conversations and debriefs with one another, we can further untangle any new feelings or thoughts that arise as we care for others. So when we encounter something new or difficult, some of us gather together, we debrief, we have lunch together if we can, um, hopefully, and untangle, like mentioned, this newness, and take a minute to think through what this means to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Juliet. Yeah, healthcare encounters are human encounters, and it's good to be reminded of the fact that we are engaged with other human beings who bring their own perspectives, and in the process of having these conversations, we might change too. So, spirituality of a healthcare provider often shapes their way of being. Oftentimes, it's talked about a compassionate presence or being able to tap into who am I as a healthcare provider, or what is my purpose in this particular relationship with this patient. Spirituality of a healthcare provider shapes attitudes and beliefs about science, about medicine, about the role of the extraordinary in healing, or the role of supernatural. Spirituality of a healthcare provider shapes attitudes and beliefs about human nature, about life, about what happens after death, values related to medical procedures. So this is connected to conscientious objection, a role in patient care, as well as resilience. Somebody has mentioned this in the chat, that being able to ground ourselves or find a sense of meaning when we witness suffering is a way in which spirituality impacts the healthcare provider. So that definitely has an impact on resilience and the ability to adapt. Internal resources available to self-care are something that comes out of spirituality as well, and such as going out for a walk in nature, or being nurtured through something that's artistic or meaningful or musical, or spending time with family and friends could also be a source of strength and healing for the healthcare providers. Openness to discussing spiritual needs of patients. This is one of the things that was found in research to be one of the barriers to actually discussing spirituality with our patients, is when we are not aware of our own spiritual needs and our own spirituality that informs who we are. So the spirituality of a healthcare provider impacts openness to discussing spiritual needs of the patient. So in the spirit of self-reflection and practice, I would like to maybe just take a few minutes to share some tools with you that might be available to you as you are reflecting on your own spirituality, with your interactions with the patients, or as you are impacted regarding a particular situation that you're working with. So if you want to think about maybe a situation or a case or a patient that you worked with, take a moment to do that. So what feelings get stirred up in me as I'm working with this patient? What is my role as I work with this patient? What beliefs inform how I am in this relationship? And how do my beliefs inform how I am being with this person? What do I hope for myself? And what do I hope for this patient? What gives me strength to keep doing this work? What am I learning about myself working with this person? And how is my worldview, values, or beliefs changing as I care for this patient? I think this is a tool that you can use going forward as you are reflecting on your spirituality in patient care. Spiritual care interventions generally aim to promote mindfulness and self-reflection. We do this in patient care, and we do this with staff. We aim to foster a sense of authenticity and inner peace, whether it's helping people get a sense of closure or forgiveness from oneself or forgiveness from another person. We help people see possibility for healing regardless of physical limitations. We strive to improve relationships with self and others. We uphold the dignity of each person. We promote resilience and what resources are available for people's strength internally. We hold space for meaning making, identify what is experienced as transcendent, if anything, and we use spiritual practices or create rituals when appropriate. These resources are available to all of you as healthcare providers, as they are available to our patients. These are the spiritual care interventions that are part of our toolbox that we like to use as we work with individuals and anyone really at HHS. Julia?
Yes. And then to conclude, I just wanted to share that sometimes we have patients that they're open to share about their spirituality, and other times this is not so evident. So we need to be attentive to what they're saying, but more so to what they're not saying. People come through our doors with a history of trauma, oppression, and potentially abuse. Let's be gentle, ask for feedback, take a minute to listen to their concerns. Let's try to connect the dots, be curious, and try to not be judgmental. And oftentimes, most of us are parachuted into complex and highly intense situations. Most times, this also happens during sacred and vulnerable moments for patients and their families. It is my impression that things escalate when both or either patients and staff, when we don't feel heard. So I invite you to take a minute, to take a big breath. If this doesn't work and you feel that your body temperature is rising, if you can, call for help, ask somebody else to step in so you can take a step back again if possible. We're taking care of people, body, mind, and spirit. We also need to take care of our own when possible. And then last but not least, again, to highlight Spiritual Care Awareness Week, like Clara mentioned, we're here to support you. We're here to engage with you. We welcome and hold space for the full range of emotions. We support our people coming through our doors, patients, families, And of course, you are welcome to utilize our services to help you process any patient encounter that ruminates in your brain and in your soul. Um, so we're here, and if you're not from HHS and you have a psychospiritual or a spiritual care provider in your site, in your area, we encourage you to reach out to them as well. Thank you.
And thank you. We're happy to take some questions, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Clara and Juliet, for your clear tips and tricks, but also for your soulful reflections and sharing of your own stories and narratives. It was very touching for me to listen to your evolution as providers as well.
Thank you. I think there's an announcement on Clara's end. We welcome any comments or questions. We have a few minutes left. We have
Gary, go ahead.
we have a hand up. Sue, I'm not sure if
They've
you
been
can-
unmuted. You can go ahead and speak. Maybe it was by accident. Maybe they've lowered their hand.
Wanted to ask a question about what we do in contexts where patients or families are experiencing a lot of shame related to their healthcare situation, their health situation, and that the root of that shame is in their cultural or religious beliefs. So how to sort of respond to them with compassion, honoring both the authenticity of their beliefs, but also hold them in maybe the shame that they're carrying related to the belief that they're bad or they're sinful or they did something and they're being punished for the situation. I've encountered patients like that many times in my career, and I've always felt at a bit of a loss of how to support their spirituality, but also connect with them from a compassionate place. So curious about your wisdom around that.
So people are welcome to share as much or as little as they want. They find relief in even just the fact of sharing that with any of us, having a sounding board, and eventually somehow they find their own meaning. They find their own understanding of why they're going through what they're going through. We try to suggest and provide some gentleness in their situation. But again, it's up to them if they want to receive it or not.
I would just add to that is that in psychotherapy we often talk about the readiness to change, and that has to do with even being able to change a particular worldview. So if a spirituality that the person comes forward is something that is bringing them a sense of shame or discontent about their current situation or the decisions that they're making, it might be a time to change the worldview or to change their spirituality or to add this experience as something that is going to be transformative and inform a new way of seeing the world. It may not happen right at the hospital because it is a crisis moment. But in my work, I sometimes just plant a seed and say, so how do you make sense out of this? This is what is happening to you now, and the way that you saw the world is not working anymore, or it's not supportive to you, or it's not helpful. Is there a different way of seeing it? Could there be a different way of seeing it?
Thank you so much. I love that invitation to reflection and that safe space for holding, but also be curious about what might be shifting. Femke and the gang are asking if you could give an example, this will be our last question and then we'll close, of ways that healthcare staff can attend to or assess patients' spiritual needs. How to even begin that conversation with patient.
So there's a couple tools that are circulating in the healthcare community, and one is by Harold Koenig, which is a religious assessment, simply looking at things around. Do you attend a faith community? Are you a member of a faith community? And is a particular religious practice important to you? So that might help in terms of finding ways of addressing religious accommodation, whether or not people have particular needs that might impact their diet, their practice in hospital, or that kind of thing. So it's a pretty straightforward question. And Harold Koenig is a physician who has done quite a bit of research in that area. I personally find the tool by Christina Puchalski, the FICA tool, to be a little bit more useful because it actually unpacks more of that spirituality. So what is it that's meaningful to you? What do you consider sacred? What are some of the key beliefs that impact your decision making? Do you have a particular spirituality or religious tradition that informs how you make decisions in healthcare, or what is important to you? So those would be, the FICA tool is something that's available, and if anybody is interested, I can, if you just wanted to send your email out to me, and then I can send you the FICA tool as well, so you can look at that. It's really geared towards healthcare providers who don't necessarily have a background in spiritual care. And the simplest question, I think, that Harvey Chochinov has come up with from his work with Dignity Health, Dignity in Care, and it's about asking the question is, what do I need to know about you as a person in order to provide the best possible care? Simple. What do I need to know about you as a person in order to provide the best possible care?
Juliet, did you want to add anything about this question of how to enter into these conversations with patients and families?
Yeah, normally it's just for me and for the staff that I have encountered is looking around, what do they have around them that could tell you some clues about who they are and what's important to them. And yeah, the straightforward answer too. Do you have a spirituality or a religion that you may need some support while you're here in the hospital? And yeah, just very simple questions. It doesn't have to be taboo, doesn't have to be this thing that we don't talk about. Patients are willing to talk about it, but they're waiting sometimes for an opening to have these conversations.
Yeah, that's an important point, Juliet, that you just made, is that I think the research has shown that patients would really love healthcare providers to ask the question.
Yeah, thank you. Which would require us to slow down enough to make space for that conversation, which is its own challenge in our system. But thank you all for joining us. And I certainly feel like I've been able to slow down and really soak in your wisdom and your guidance around how to engage this critical part of providing whole person care for patients and families and for ourselves. So thank you so much, Juliet and Clara. Wishing you all the best for a wonderful Spiritual Care Awareness Week. And to all of those who've joined us, wishing you time this week to really reflect on your own spirituality, take time to nourish yourself spiritually, and to reflect on how to bring your unique spirituality to support the incredible care that you all provide one another and our community every day. So thank you. And we're looking forward to welcoming folk back next month. The first week of November is National Health Ethics Week, so we'll have some special events, including an ethics grand rounds with our colleague Allison Van Kessel, who will be speaking on the MAID family experience, so families' experiences with medical assistance in dying. So watch for that advertising coming out, hoping you can join us. during National Health Ethics Week, and wishing all of you a wonderful day and week to come. So thank you all. Thanks, Juliet and Clara.